What's up and welcome to Idle Insights, a show where I, Treavor Bettis, talk to interesting people about idle champions and Dungeons and Dragons. And with me this week is Eugenio Vargas!
Hi!
Hey!
I'll do my best to be that interesting person, I don't know.
You are. Everyone that I talk to here is interesting, and I will die on that hill.
Fair enough, thank you. I'll take the compliment because I'm working on that.
Yeah. Well, if people watching this somehow don't know who are you for those fine folks who may not know?
Yeah, hi, I'm Eugenio Vargas. If you know DM Jazzy Hands, that's me. I'm a Game Master, Dungeon Master with podcast. I'm a streamer, I'm a designer. I've worked on stuff for Wizards, with Fizbins, with MCDM, with Co-DMing. Yeah, I do all that stuff. And in the before times, and maybe one day again, I used to be an actor, so.
Hey. I do have to say, because you and I have hung out and talked, but I've never actually said this to you. I absolutely love your Twitter handle so damn much.
Oh.
It's so, like, the first time I saw it, I'm like, that is perfect.
Oh, thank you. It comes from a show I did when I was in college. There was an annual student-written musical review, and my sophomore year, I think it was, the sort of theme for the show was it was set in this nightclub in Chicago, and it was the club's last night before it got bulldozed, so all the regulars came in.
Yeah.
Right? And the DJ was DJ Jazzy Hands. And so I straight up stole that and just changed the letter.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely perfect. Fully own that one.
Oh yeah. Oh, I do. And if the actor who played DJ Jazzy Hands wants to come after me, he is more than welcome to.
You look at them and go, roll initiative.
That's right.
So yeah, I love starting these shows off by asking people, like, my favorite question to get to know someone that likes D&D, which is, how did you get into D&D?
Yeah, I have sort of always been aware of it when I was a kid, but I never really had a chance to play growing up. And right before 5th edition came out, so this would have been 2014, late spring, early summer 2014, my roommate at the time and I were at home and we'd had a few drinks, and he turned to me and he goes, "I have to tell you something." And I thought, I have had too many drinks for you to suddenly decide to confess your love to me. No, but what he actually said was, "I've always really wanted to play D&D. And after I got over the relief, I said, oh my God, me too, let's do it. And so I had some friends that were in a choir with me who I knew played on Friday nights, and we asked if we could join them. They were still playing 3.5 at the time. And so we started playing with them. They were in the middle of a campaign. So what we actually came in and did at first was we helped the DM run monsters during combat. Which, you know, is always useful, but in the 3.5 days was particularly useful.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Oh, those stat blocks.
That DM made me a spiral-bound notebook with stat blocks for all the monsters in her dungeon. I have it somewhere. I should look for it.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. So we did that for a while, and then one of their players had to step away because of some medical issues, some health issues. And so we stepped in and co-played her character, ended up giving them a couple of different emergent personalities, and we would trade off who was in lead control. And the rest was sort of history. 5e came out. I bought those core books, got a group of my friends, and started running Lost Minds of Phandelver.
And, so good.
Much of that group is still my cast of the podcast that I'm doing here, you know, all these years later. So that was sort of it.
That's so cool. Yeah. I gotta be honest, that's one of my favorite stories I've ever heard. Like, I have to tell you something. I've always wanted to play D&D. Like, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, me too. I love the way that ended up for both of us. Yeah.
That's awesome. And now you're playing in a familiar quest.
Yeah, series 2.
Yeah, well, and you're an alumnist.
Yes, we 3 bedraggled old veterans from season 1.
So long ago in that year of April.
Time is a flat circle, and you know it. So.
It is. I recently heard time is a pizza, and I really love that one.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess, like, you know, I recently talked to Latia, and so I'm sure some people watching this know what Familiar Quest is, but just in case someone's tuning in for the first time, what is Familiar Quest?
Shenanigans, chaos. It's a campaign that was originally conceived by the illustrious Todd Kenrick, where the players are all the familiars of wizards and warlocks and whoever else took a feat that gave them the Find Familiar spell, who have been, well, it depends on who you ask, severed or just separated from their conjuring companion, and are going on adventures themselves. So we started in Barovia in Ravenloft last series, and sort of solved some problems as familiars do, which is to say, not super well, but hey, we did it. And now we find ourselves back on the material plane somewhere in the city of Waterdeep. So more, and we have discovered, you know, that there are more issues that familiars of Waterdeep are facing. So of course we're getting ourselves involved.
And yeah, you play Colonel Pest.
Oh. Well, formerly Colonel Pest, but he did resign his commission at the end of season 1.
Fair.
Although now, based on the plot of season 2, he may be taking that commission back up. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So tell me about Pest. Like what? Why is he called Pest?
Well, he's called Pest because originally he took the form of a pest familiar from Strixhaven. His original conjurer was a researcher in Witherbloom at Strixhaven, and Pest was there as his familiar, and did research with him. And over the course of decades and potentially centuries, Pest sort of has a tough time remembering his origins.
Time is a pizza.
But exactly right. Time is a pizza. So some time ago, long time ago, he's been doing this, and so he developed the skills of a druid, being surrounded by Witherbloom students and doing natural research and that sort of stuff. So he very simply, you know, his conjuring companion was kind of a no-nonsense dude, and was like, well, you are a pest, your name is Pest. Don't take it too personally. And now that Pest is no longer a pest mascot, this is his first form change, at least that he can remember in his existence. The name does just sort of feel it hits a little different now.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, he's so used to it that it hasn't really sunk in yet, I don't think. But like eventually, if he doesn't go back to pest form at any point, you know, in a couple decades, it's gonna be okay. I understand where it came from, but it'd be so nice if everyone just didn't call me names.
It's like one of those, like, you know, normal, you know, real world words that gets used in a fantasy way that just eventually loses its meaning, and then one day you're like, wait a minute. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to talk about the creation of Pest as the character, and I kind of wanted to start off with, why a pest?
Yeah, well, so when we started the character creation process, Todd sort of hinted that in his head there was part of this story, whatever it was going to end up being, right, was about the sort of mutable nature of familiars, right? If one of them dies, you can resummon them and you can pick the form that they take based on the spell or whatever, right? And so I, first of all, wanted to pick something totally out in left field and weird because...
Perfect.
Because why not, right? But also, I had in my head at first that if there was a series of form changes for Pest, that maybe it would just be bouncing around to the different Strixhaven house mascots. So maybe Pest would start as a pest worm and then would end up as, you know, a fractal, and then
like an inkling.
An inkling, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the original thought, and so, you know, it was a fun concept that also let me be real lazy for at least the next few changes. Is the truth, because they were picked for me in that case. Of course, then I went and made it harder on myself, because that's what I do, and didn't do that. But that's where it all sort of started from. They also, you know, we keep, for the most part, our familiar sizes, right? So Pest as a pest mascot was a tiny creature,
yes,
right, who is adventuring, which is fine for a spellcaster. There are spell effects that a tiny caster can pull off that is not going to be a problem, but like opening doors.
Yeah, then you start to get into like the Honey I Shrunk the Kids, like, wait, how are they actually going to get around?
being stepped on, right? So one of the reasons that the pest mascot was attractive to me to start with is they have that regeneration feat where they regen 5 HP in a round. So I thought, well, look, if I'm going to be tiny and easily squished, I might as well at least be able to, you know, handle that. So between the regeneration and then, you know, druid wild shapes, I thought, well, we'll keep Pest alive for at least one season.
And I you know, I don't get to catch a lot of the show, but like I've watched at least the first episode of both seasons. And the first episode of the first season, I just I love that episode. And like if you watching this have not seen the first episode of a familiar quest, I cannot tell you how much of a joy it is, because you know I remember I told Latia this, where I was like, oh yeah, you know, it's about familiars. This is gonna be really cool. Like I can't wait to see what adventures. It takes place in Barovia, and I go, of course it does.
Okay.
And,
yeah.
And so like, you know, what was it that, because I'm assuming you all found out about Barovia beforehand because you were in Ravenloft, the Castle Ravenloft. Yeah. When you found that out, how did you start trying, like, what was the thought process of tying Pest to this location?
To be honest with you, we did find out about Barovia ahead of time, but I was brought on to the cast pretty late in the process before season 1 started. So I didn't have between trying to figure out what Pest being a Pest meant in terms of character mechanics and everything else. Fair. I didn't actually have a ton of time to figure that out. So if you watch closely enough in that first episode, you can probably see me absolutely making everything up as I went along.
Hey, what is D&D if not that at the best times?
Absolutely. And this was so out in left field that we all sort of like, I don't know how noticeable it is in the VOD, but like we could feel in that moment, this moment of, we don't have any idea what's happening or what to do. And there's just a point in that episode where we're all like, oh, well, let's just do things. So the story of Pest ended up being that, in fact, his companion, his conjuring companion, had come to Ravenloft long ago for research and then had left. And that's sort of part of what Pest doesn't remember particularly well. But now Pest has spent a century plus hanging out in Castle Ravenloft. And of course, our Barovia for the show's canon is the Barovia in which Strahd von Zarovich had been defeated by an adventurer named Whittle, which of course is Meaghan Kenrick's character. And then some weird stuff happened. So Pest was a longtime friend of Whittle, and then weird stuff happened, and Whittle became a gnome squidling familiar, and so their friendship, continued. But that was my in for the story, was that Whittle and I had sort of cohabitated in Castle Ravenloft for a while.
And I do absolutely love that. I do love that this is kind of the secret spin-off of what was it? Heroes of the Plains.
Heroes of the Plains.
Yeah. It's like a few years from now, it's gonna be like somebody's watching this and they're like, wait a minute, is this connected to that other? It's gonna be like when we found out like all those 70s sitcoms were like spin-offs of Happy Days, and we were like, what?
Yeah, totally.
I kind of wish more stream shows did that, where it was just wild spin-offs of other shows.
Well, and it certainly lends. I mean, it has certainly created an interesting, canon for our world, for our whatever multiversal dimension, for Barovia, right? Because Strahd is gone, but then we just did some things, right? So now like Barovia is infested with a horde of half-formed clones of Whittle, just because we're bad at things. And also the mists are gone, kind of. And also so I too love the opportunity to take something that started in one campaign and just dial it up to 11.
I mean, that probably does come from some of my home game stuff, because almost every home game of 5th edition I've run is in the same timeline. Yeah. And so I've loved getting to let future players mess with stuff that previous players had done. Like at one point, one of my players almost killed one of my old players' characters, and I was getting ready to be like, I have to text my friend, his character's dead.
I have done and do mostly for my home games, not so much for stream games, but I do the same thing. Years ago, I ran Last Minds of Phandelver. That was my first thing. Several years later, that Friday group that taught me D&D, I pulled some teeth, and transitioned them to 5e, and then ended up running Out of the Abyss for them. And when they got to the second half of the adventure where the representatives from the 5 different factions come to Gauntlgrim, spoilers, I guess, but like I feel like the statute of limitations is up.
Yeah, it's pretty far.
Yeah.
It's also in the game.
Also that. When all of the faction leaders come to Gauntlgrim to discuss what's going on and the demon lords, and then sort of ultimately get the adventurers to go on the second half of the adventure, all of my Lost Mines of Phandelver characters had joined factions. So I swapped out the NPCs for them and was texting my other players while we were playing.
Love that.
Oh, they did this to your wizard, and like I think your wizard will probably be pretty pissed about this, and like not give them support. What do you think? And it was so fun.
I love that stuff. That is so good.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I wanted to ask about was like, what, you know, we're into series 2 of A Familiar Quest. What has Pest's character arc been like? And I think that's kind of like, you know, it's a familiar, like that's not usually a question that comes up with them, but like y'all do have these like very like almost like very quickly noticeable character traits to them, and I'm wondering like what have you found that's different from like when Pest first started to now?
Yeah, I mean, for series 1, Pest's whole sort of arc was about the truth about his he calls him the professor, his conjuring companion, and Strahd, the remains of Strahd, which is to say just his hand, sort of played some nasty tricks on Pest and made him really question where he came from. Was the professor actually just a researcher at Strixhaven, or was he in fact researching some super nefarious stuff? And if that's the case, what does that mean for the work that Pest's whole early life consisted of? How does that affect his work in Castle Ravenloft as a military commander of a very important platoon in the courtyard of Castle Ravenloft? So it was all about sort of figuring out what the truth of his past was and what and if that meant for him now. Series 2, he has left behind, like I said, that army commission, that military commission, a lot, and spent, well, now he's in Waterdeep, but spent a lot of time in between series exploring the rest of Barovia. And I think what we're going to find in series 2 is that Pest had all that really kind of troublesome, traumatic stuff about his past and worked through it to the extent that he feels like he needs to at this point, and now is just trying to like flip the script and figure out what's next for him, right? I have left that commission behind. I have left questions, for at least for now, about the professor behind. I have new friends. We're doing things. You know, in episode 2, Pest sort of called the question of like, are we, like, we've done adventurous things, but are we, as a bunch of familiars who are friends, going to be adventurers, right? So he, and there was a situation right at the end of the episode where he was like, oh, maybe I actually need to retake that commission and like work on building a new military because of stuff I don't want to spoil that's happening in season 2, right? So like maybe the future is similar to the past. He doesn't know. This season's going to be a lot about figuring out what Pest actually wants for himself.
I love that. And Pest has a new form that we talked about previously.
Yeah.
What is Pest now?
So Pest is now a Grimishka, which is a horrible little cat-like creature. This is not the horrible part, to be very clear. I want to say that now so I don't get hate mail. The basic form is kind of like a Sphinx cat, except with bat ears. Of course, Pest has his signature way too sharp teeth. But the biggest thing about this new form for poor Pest, who is a druid and thus a spellcaster, is that Grimishkas are allergic to magic.
What? Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Grimishka Pest sneezes a lot, and once a day, if he's not careful, can do other things. So far, in the first 2 episodes, we have seen him sneeze so explosively that he caused force damage to a party member. And there are other things that can happen that I have not rolled on my random table yet, but they're...
You're a druid with wild magic through sneezing.
It's wild. We also changed his voice, which I realized too late nobody else in the returning cast was doing. Fine. So yeah, because as a pest worm, he was obviously inspired by the little worm from Labyrinth. Hello. No, I said hello, but that's close enough, right?
I never put that together.
That's why he has a little green scarf, because that little worm has a cute little red scarf that always stood out to me.
God dang. I looked at the webcomic Luke made, and I'm just like, I love this scarf. It's so adorable. Why do I recognize that? I never put it together. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that was his voice and whatever for the pest form. But I thought, well, look, his vocal apparatus is different as a Grimishka than as a worm. I don't really want to talk about the fact that the worm probably didn't have one. It doesn't matter. So his voice has got to be different.
Yeah.
So this season he is, a bad impression of Eartha Kitt doing Yzma and the Emperor's New Groove.
Beautiful description. I love that.
Yeah.
But no, like I think that really fits. Because like I will say, like I think that really fits for changing from Pest to whatnot. I gotta be honest, if Michelle changed the voice of Meaghan, I would have been so sad.
That's true.
Like the moment she did that voice, I'm like, I love this.
It's true. And frankly, Gale too, in a lesser way, but we saw some spoilers for whenever we change form, but it's fine. You all just go watch. But Gale's cute little rat mouse turns into a miniature giant seahorse, who, just like tiny rat version of Gale, is kind of terrified by almost everything that happens, which is even funnier that he's a barbarian.
Yeah.
But like that too in miniature giant horseshoe or horse. What is the seahorse? Oh my god.
Words.
Form like also needs to be like that cute, adorable mousy voice that M does for him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and now you all have a new companion. I'm going to talk to, but like I gotta ask, like, how has Pest and Marvel been so far?
So Pest was the first one to get to meet Marvel, and so Pest was the first one to be deeply confused by Marvel.
You played that so well too. I'm just like, wait a minute, that wasn't who I what?
So Pest was so impressed with Marvel's performance when he first met him that I think he's on board, even for the somewhat disturbing contradictions about Marvel that are only slowly beginning to be unraveled. I also think, like, the fact that Marvel presents as, I mean, Marvel is an imp, and like is not a good character on the alignment scale. Not like, I'm not judging the quality
I get what you mean.
Right, yeah. And I think that is really interesting and speaks to Pest because of everything that happened to him last season about, like, oh, if my professor was not good, does that mean I'm not good? Oh, so with Marvel, it's, oh, this person thinks he's not good, but is willing to hang out with us and has been, let's say, destructively helpful. So what is that like? So who is this person? So Pest is very curious about Marvel, somewhat disturbed by the summoning of demons that he does. But
I heard about that. You know, fun times, new friends, summoning demons, as you do. Yeah, you know, it's just an average Monday.
Totally fine.
So I did want to shift gears here a little bit. You know, I like I said, I recently talked to Latia, and we talked about rivals and whatnot. And you know, I told her that, like, one of the things I was absolutely fascinated with rivals is that you all switch DM seats. And I think that's a really fascinating way to not only just do a game, but to do a streamed game. But you and Urban Bohemian, Brian, you both co-DM'd the same season, and I'm very curious about it because, like, I've seen some other shows do this, and I've tried it once, but I was mainly like helping my friend like get comfortable with DMing. How does co-DMing work?
Shout out to Devin and Dustin from D4, because I watched, I played with the two of them and also watched some bits and pieces and took, you know, our style was very different, but seeing the way that they sort of pass things back, and we took a lot of what we could from them and their stuff. So shout out to them because they're great. For us, it was actually way easier than I think either of us thought it was going to be, because as Brian and I have discovered, we do in and out of character. We really are very in sync. We have not known each other all that long, but we think in the same way about a lot of things. We have a lot of the same ideas. We make a lot of the same references as jokes and things like that. And so in terms of syncing up to people's brains to run a game, actually it wasn't bad at all. We got kind of lucky with that. In terms of like the mechanics of how we actually did it, we as we were planning the season as a whole, we just sort of threw stuff at the wall, and eventually both of us, you could watch both of us react to each idea, and our reactions were pretty on the level. So when we both were like, oh, we just took that one, right? And then every week we would have a little time before session to say, okay, here's it was way more structured than I think it may have been if either of us were DMing on our own.
Oh, interesting.
We did need to kind of know, here is where we're going to start them. Here is ultimately, however we get there, here's kind of where we're hoping to go. Here are 3 other options for where we end up, because it's a game of D&D and
yes,
also the rivals. But what that meant was each week after a session, we would, Brian takes excellent notes after a session. So he would sort of come up with a sheet of what we accomplished. We would have a meeting to say, okay, so if we're aiming for this in, X more episodes, here's what we need to kind of at least introduce to them next week. And we would pick, 2 or 3 points that we had to hit. We would try and kind of game out where we thought they might take a left turn and figure out sort of what to do there. And then sort of go for it. We instinctually sort of had a feel for each other's strengths. I'm way more comfortable with sort of with combat and with the mechanical numerical rules. So when we did combat, that would largely pass to me.
That was what I was gonna ask about. Is like, one of the things that I've always wondered about is like figuring out like, okay, who does the description here? Who's taking the lead on this? And was that just kind of like a thing that just kind of flowed from the get-go, or what did you kind of decide on that?
A little of both. So some things like combat, we knew from the outset. Like that was one of the reasons that Brian knew he didn't want to DM on his own, was that there were things like that he was not super comfortable with. So things like combat, we knew like we will assign which one of us is taking which creatures, because we'll have a couple of encounter options depending on what the cast does in the episode, but we have a sense of what monsters are coming up. So we divvy up those, and we just knew that like I would sort of take the forefront for questions and numbers and things like that. And then description things were pretty evenly split, but we tried to keep an eye on, Brian actually was the sort of impetus for the way that the Dragon's Lair at the end of the season looked. And we both contributed to it, but Brian should take the lead on describing it when they see it for the first time. Character interact, NPCs, Brian knew that he wanted to be Mr. Light, right, of Witch and Light, and so I was like, great, I'll do Witch and we'll have fun with that, right? But there were some NPCs that it was like, we didn't expect this person to talk, and so we also we would have a backstage Slack DM in the rival server open, and we would type each other there, and we had ongoing notes and things like that. So there was behind the scenes communication, which was really funny, because our finale was live at PAX Unplugged.
Yeah.
Couldn't send each other messages so easily. And in my prep, I was like, it'll be fine. I'll be like, we'll be next. Like, I can lean over and just say it to you. And then we got there, and I was like, oh, there's a microphone in my face. I can't do that. Okay.
That's fair. Yeah. Oh man, yeah. No, I guess it would kind of help too with like, there's always the joke about the problem of like the DM talking to themselves because there's 2 NPCs that need to communicate something. It's so I have to imagine that'd be so much better with 2 people.
It was so great. Yeah, it's funny. I do get asked that question. I do get asked about our season every now and again, and every time I answer, like, there are certain things that like I can answer very easily. There are certain things that I was more comfortable with, so I took care of combat. We would chat backstage. but I wish I had better advice for other co-DMs. But the truth is, like, Brian and I just got very lucky and are very in sync and riff off of each other very well.
I gotta be honest, like just from I think just hearing the way that you all did it is kind of good advice in itself. I mean, like there's a thing that I'm working on that we were talking about doing co-DMing, and we decided to just alternate instead because we weren't sure if we would be able to do the co-DMing thing because we wouldn't be next to each other. Yeah. And y'all are like literally the poster children for that. Of just like it works, which is now making me go, crap, should we have tried that?
I mean, the one concrete thing that I also can say that I've sort of realized in this time I'm answering the question is that it definitely did for it to be easy on Sunday. It did require more structured prep every week, right? Because then we both knew what we needed to accomplish in an episode and what the sort of shape of the episode was going to be like. And then it's just trust, right? I trusted him that if he started doing something that we hadn't talked about, I trusted, right? That he had an idea and we're still aiming for the same goals in this session and in this season. And so, okay, that's what D&D is. Like we've already said, I'll make it up as we go. I'll let you take that lead. I trust you that we're not, throwing out all of our planning, that you're going to get there. And we always did. And that was that, but only because we were able to have that structure, right? Yeah. Because we had the plan. We know that, this NPC has to be introduced. They have to figure out that it's a dragon over there doing the thing. And also here's, 2 options for combat.
Yeah. No, yeah, I do think that, like, from hearing you talking and experiencing it a little bit, like, it is definitely one of those things that, like, I don't think I could co-DM with just anyone.
Yeah, no,
yeah. It definitely you definitely do have to be on like that kind of same wavelength and whatnot. Though I do think that you could probably do it like different styles. Like, would you say that your and Brian's styles are the same for DMing?
No.
Oh.
No, I think Brian has a really, really good eye and mind for for several things, but in particular for keeping in mind sort of the whole arc. So one of the things that he and I talked about was that we really wanted our season to make the point to the rivals that they're big BFDs. They are big deals, right? They were, at that point, they were 16th level, I think.
Oh,
right?
wow.
They had been to Avernus, they'd been to Icewind Dale, they'd done this and this and that, right? And our thing was like, hey, there are still problems for you to solve. There are still adventures for you to go on. But you have to realize that people know who you are, right? And you're a big deal to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And how does that interact with your existence, right? And to be honest, like, we were both sort of thinking about that as semi-public figures and in real life, and sort of what that means for the way that we interact with the people around us, things like that. And Brian was so good at remembering that in a session where we had a moment and an NPC was saying something, and Brian would find ways to thread that sort of conceit into all of these interactions in ways that, like, I'm so busy figuring out what gear the NPC has for this next fight that's coming up sometimes that I sort of lose sight of that if I don't really have it all written out. Brian is also wonderful in a completely different way than I am with NPCs and voices. And so that was super fun to get to do that together. Our similarities definitely lie in, we both very much want to give the players as much freedom as we possibly can, but I also think we draw that line in similar places, and every DM can sort of take that to different levels, and we are permissive to about the same point, which was nice.
I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and on Last Refuge, on my podcast, right, that I've been doing for 5.5 years now, I have a similar situation, but different. I have a story consultant for that campaign. So I have a friend of mine who is, in a lot of ways, my polar opposite. He is the best, and I don't tell him this enough, and I hope he watches this interview, because I really, really value, like, our friendship in general and his work on that show, because we are so different. And so he has turned that podcast into something that it never would have been if it had just been me behind the helm.
Interesting.
But we are so different that bless him, I would never co-DM with him. I I would never, ever, ever be in a live situation where we are both trying to control a narrative at the same time. So, you know, you just sort of have to know, if you're going to do it, you have to know what your goal is and figure out what it is about the other person, right? That's getting value added.
Yeah.
Right. Is it the opposing point of view? Then maybe a co-DM situation is not it. Right. Is it that in the moment support? Is it so that you don't have to talk to yourself? Is it so that you can, you know, bounce off each other in the moment because you are so similar? Then maybe it is co-DMing that you want to give a try.
Yeah, I mean, you're just making me think. I'm like, oh yeah, no, there's plenty of my friends that I couldn't co-DM with, and it's not because like it's not like any fault of their own. I just know I'm too chaotic for them. Like, I am the kind of DM that just be like, oh, that sounds really cool. Let's do that.
So I can't decide if I should say that you absolutely should co-DM with my story consultant friend. Or that you shouldn't because the world will explode.
Like this is always the example that I give of where how the chaos of my games go. We were literally starting Storm King's Thunder. And like I said, they all take place in the same. I'd already had a group do what you call it, Tomb of Annihilation, and the Ring of Winter is mentioned in both of those, and somehow I can't remember the exact thing that happened. They ended up finding out, oh, the Frost Giants want the Ring of Winter. The Ring of Winter is in Chult. We're going to go to Chult. So I was like, yeah, okay. And I put the book down and I opened up Tomb of Annihilation again and went, we're playing a sequel. Let's go.
Yep. I love it. I love it.
Well, one other thing that I want to talk, you've mentioned Last Refuge here a few times, and I haven't known about that show. Tell me about Last Refuge.
Yeah, so Last Refuge is my podcast. So we started it back in 2017 as sort of a, you know, we'd finished our Lost Mine of Phandelver campaign, and I thought, God, there are so many moments that I only kind of remember, but that like I want to hold on to because damn, they were fun. And so I said, let's do it. We're going to play another campaign. We're going to record it for a podcast. If nobody listens, who cares? We can listen and go back and remember these fun moments. And so we all started. It was largely that group from Phandelver. We had one friend of mine who joined the cast of the podcast who had never played before. So we had a little bit of that. And it's been great. It is the story of 3 Aasimar and a Tiefling who, at the very beginning of the campaign, wake up in a new world, and they don't know why they're there, how they got there, or how to get home. And originally, the story of the show was, or of the campaign was, that eventually they discovered that the 3 Aasimar, in fact, are sisters and share an angelic father who works for a god who was sort of chafing against the rules of the Forgotten Realms, which say that the gods are not allowed to directly interfere in the lives of mortals anymore. That's a thing that Eo, the Overgod, proclaimed during the Second Sundering, whatever. And so Denir, which is the god that we were using, was like, this sucks. Everything's going to hell or whatever. I want a new world where like we can make things better. And so the 4 of them were meant to go and consecrate these places of power to Denir so that he could form a connection to this new world and blah, blah. Well, that ain't what happened.
Because players were involved.
Well, yes, and also because, and one of the great things, and this is another thing that I really have to credit for Robert, is that, you know, 2017 was a very different time for the gaming community and sort of our outlook onto lore and stories and D&D and all of that. And so what started, as I now realize, as like a weirdly, I am not a religious person, but like a weirdly religious, like crusade-y kind of story that I didn't intend for it to be that, but that was sort of the idea that I started with. It became actually this really interesting story of these 4 people who have this connection to this very powerful god. And they say, you know what, actually the personal connections that we're making in this world are more important than letting you come in and effectively, you know, what's divinely colonize this new world, right?
That's fascinating.
They decided for reasons that you know sort of are varied that they didn't want to, when the end of season 4, I think, We're on, it's going to be a 10-season campaign. So at
Oh,
the end of
wow.
season 4, it was supposed to be 5, they decided they had an opportunity to consecrate the first of their places of power, and they didn't. They just decided not to. They said, you know what, this is
love
not
that.
what we're here to do actually anymore. This causes other problems. This puts our friends in danger in ways that we don't really fully understand. And so the rest of the show since then has been about them learning more about this world and ultimately discovering that there's a big terrible thing that they have to, prevent in the, in fantasy role-playing.
Yeah.
But it's been this really cool journey for them of meeting way more of this world's cultures than I ever had planned to have on the show, and really taken a left turn for this story that I have loved, right? And that doubled our season count.
Well, I think that is absolutely fascinating. And I honestly, I mean, I can't really think of too many times I've heard of, especially on a stream show where it's like the players made this like absolutely narrative breaking decision, but we're gonna go with it. And like I think that is such a love letter to player agency, and like one of the best reasons to play a game. Because like I know there's people out there that's just like, oh, this is my plot line and everything. I'm like, no, it's everybody's. Like, it's everybody's at the table. You're all co-brainstorming this story in real time with some dice. That's absolutely fascinating. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, and they had good reasons, right? And I will not say it was completely out in left field that they made the choice, right? There was always going to be downsides to doing what Denier told them to go do, right? Because if not, then what's the conflict? What's the problem, right? But they did some real deep soul searching, and turned out that those downsides that I thought were kind of minor, their characters really felt were more important. And I said, well, if that's what y'all are going to do, I'm not going to change it. We always take a little bit of a hiatus between seasons, so I have X weeks to write a new campaign. It's fine.
Everything's fine. Everything is good. Don't worry. No, everything is fine. What season are y'all up to now?
So we are in between seasons 9 and 10 now.
Oh,
we are almost done.
Wow.
We're delaying starting to drop season 10 a little bit because we have some things in the works to make season 10 extra special. Well, nothing's been inked yet, so I don't want to say too much more than that.
That's fair.
We're aiming to make our finale season really, really cool for the
Nice.
folks that have made it that far. So right now we're doing there's a big season 10. Our finale season is, I can't say too much in case folks aren't there, but is sort of the big culmination dealing with what has become the actual BBEG, right, of the campaign, such as it is. And so what we're doing right now, we finished season 9 about a month and a half ago. And right now we've moved to bi-weekly episodes where we're taking little glimpses. The characters have 18 months to prepare for their assault on the end. And so because I need plant time, because my story consultant and I need time to plan this epic 10th season, we've gone bi-weekly with our releases, and we're just taking little half-hour episodes of, you guys mentioned that you wanted to do this in preparation for the big finale. Let's see how that prep goes.
That's really cool. I love that.
It's gone really well. I came up with the idea because I had to have time to prep for season 10, and I didn't know how they were going to turn out, but actually I'm really pleased with the way that the episodes have come out so far. We've only released 2 in this interim hiatus season, like mini season, but I think they're super fun and an easy, not super tedious way, right? Because especially with podcasting, you don't have any visuals at all, right? You can sort of find your mind wandering. So we keep it tight. We keep and we're able to address these really cool ideas, right, that the party has for dealing with different threats, but in these condensed ways where it's like, okay, this works, this doesn't, this is a cool this is a cool unexpected result, and then we can move on to the next thing.
That's really cool. I love that. I love seeing like ways of mixing up and changing like how these actual plays are done, and that is fascinating. I really love it. I gotta listen to that.
Yeah, and I love this podcast. I love being able to do this podcast because we've done that several times, right? In between,
I
think it was the end of season 1. we did a little hiatus series of what I called mini-sodes, where I had the 4 players write their own backstory episode. It could be in any format they wanted, but I wanted to know a little bit more about the characters, because we got thrown in very in media res, right? They woke up and they're somewhere else and they got attacked, right? So one of my players wrote me an outline for like a traditional D&D session where we played through his backstory, and that was super fun and was great. Another one of my players wrote a musical. Wrote parody lyrics for a bunch of musical theater songs.
That's
and
beautiful.
Assigned us all roles, and we told the story of our druid in music.
Somewhere in the world, my wife's heart is warmed right now by this.
It was so fun. One of them did an inside the actor studio interview. That was super fun.
That's
and the
so
fourth one did a radio play where we like did a bunch of sound effects and Foley stuff for it. So and there are other examples over the history of the show, but we have loved, especially in between seasons, we've loved screwing with the format. And it's not all of them are as, they're not all at the same level of work. It worked. But it's been so fun to just play with other ways to tell these characters' stories that are so rooted right in D&D. Right? The trope, a lot of the tropes and a lot of the big concepts are very D&D. So that's doing a musical for one of them or whatever has been a ton of fun.
You always got to have that random musical episode. Is just we're getting towards the end of our time here, but like is this the longest running game that you're gonna wrap up?
It is. Yes, I had to go back and sort of tick through all of them. It is. Yeah, we've been going since July of 2017.
Wow.
And really, for the first 8 seasons, missed very few weeks did we not put out an episode over the first 3.5, 4 years. And then things have gotten a little tougher, and now we're purposely taking a hiatus because we want the last season to be special. But yeah, it's been a long time.
I love wrapping up campaigns. Like I know a lot of people have those like, oh no, it's ending, but I'm like, I always love getting to see how that happens and everything like that. And especially a campaign that's been running for so long, like that ending has so much meaning, and I love that stuff. It's so good.
Yeah, we're excited. Every time we mention that it's coming to a close, you can see at least one of us be like, okay, I need a minute. Hold on.
I bet. But that's awesome. That really is. Yeah. Well, Eugenio, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me today. This has been a blast.
Yes, it always is fun to talk to you, Trevor. Thank you so much for having me.
If people wanted to find you and all your work, Last Refuge and whatnot, where could they do so?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter and Twitch at DM Jazzy Hands, and there's a link on my Twitter to my website, which desperately needs an update, but does have some links to some of my other stuff. It's eugeniovargas.com, and you can check out the Last Refuge at DND Last Refuge on Twitter, Instagram, and I guess in Facebook, but I have one of my players deal with Facebook.
That's fair.
You can check us out if you want to be real ambitious. We're aiming to have season 10 start dropping about mid or late fall. So if you want to start now, it's only I think 230 episodes to catch up. So.
Hey, there you go. Put something on while you're playing All Champions.
That's right. And we try and keep them all to less than an hour.
So, beautiful.
When I see 3 sets of digits on a podcast, I take a deep breath and hit that 2 times speed. So.
Big save. and don't forget, you can catch a Familiar Quest Mondays right now on twitch.tv/CNE Games, literally where you're watching this right now, unless it's later on YouTube. But
just stay here.
Just stay here.
This tab open.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry. It's fine. That's Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And yeah, I cannot wait to see what all the wild antics y'all get up to. It's gonna be great.
Same.
But yeah, thank you again so much for being here. That is gonna do it for this week's episode of Idle Insight. So until next week, take care of yourself.